Hello everyone. Before we dive into today's video, I have a small favor to ask. I'm currently developing a psychological horror game called Pit of Despair, and I would be grateful if you could take a moment to wishlist it. Think PT Silent Hills meets The Exit 8. This tutorial is completely free, but if you'd like to support me, you can get the project files on Patreon with a one-time purchase or a monthly subscription. All links are in the description below. Let's begin. So to start, you will have to create a new Unity project. Make sure you selected Universal 3D Core. I will be naming my project Looping Hallway. You could name yours whatever you like. In the new Unity project, start by creating two empty game objects and name them both Hallway Piece 1 and Hallway Piece 2. After you have done that, we will start by creating the pieces of the main hallway. I will be using ProBuilder, but you can use whatever blockout tool you want. For the walls, I will use cubes, and for the floors, I will use planes. The walls I will give a width of 0.25 and a height of 3. I will give both the walls and floor a length of 12.5. The floor I will give a width of 3. I just duplicate the first wall I have created to make my job a bit easier. If both walls and floor are created, you can snap them together by using the Move tool and pressing V on your keyboard. This could be used by hovering over an edge, left mouse clicking and dragging to snap items correctly together. When you snapped the two walls and the floor together, make sure to drag them into the empty game object Hallway Piece 1 we have just created. Make a duplicate of those two walls and floor you just created and drag them into the empty game object Hallway Piece 2. Now you have two identical hallway pieces. Now you should snap together the two hallway pieces we have just created. Snap them together in the same way I am snapping them together on screen. This is important because we will create a corner piece in the next part of the video. Start by creating the floor by adding a plane to the scene and making the width 2.75 and the length 3. Create two walls. The first wall will have a width of 0.25, a height of 3 and a length of 2.5. The second wall will also have a width of 0.25 and a height of 3, but its length will be 3. Make sure you snap the two walls and the floor together like shown in the video. After you snapped all the pieces together, drag them into an empty game object named Corner Piece. Drag and snap the corner piece to the two hallway pieces. Now we will be making the last two sections of the hallway. Start by duplicating one of the hallway pieces. Drag the duplicated piece a bit forward, select the two walls and the floor and make their length a bit smaller. For the next part, you have to drag in your door prefab. If any of you don't have a working door, I can make a tutorial about doors that close automatically behind you, so please let me know. Anyways, now we will have to create walls that will fit around the door. I will first try to correctly align the door with the hallway opening. I will start by creating the side wall piece. This piece will have a width of 0.25, a height of 3 and a length of 0.9. After you have created this wall piece, duplicate it and drag the duplicated wall piece over to the other side of the door. Now snap the wall pieces and door to the open end of the hallway. Next, you will have to create a wall piece that will fill the gap above the door. I used the rack tool to mold this piece into the right size so that it would fit. Now we will add the floor. Press the eye icon on the hallway game object to make it disappear so you can have a better view of the door and its walls. I will again use a plane for the floor and make it 0.25 wide because the walls are also 0.25 wide and the length 3 because the walls are also 3. After you have done this, snap the floor piece to the door and its walls. Make a new game object, name it something like door and frame, and drag the door, walls and floor you have just created into the empty game object. Duplicate this game object and give it a proper name. Drag forward the duplicated game object and snap it to the other open hallway end. Now we will create the teleport/trigger zone. I will just use a normal cube and give it a big enough size to fill up the hallway. The trigger zone will be used to attach the script and teleport the player when they walk into it. And the teleport zone will be used as the zone where the player will be teleported to. But more on that later. Add an empty game object and call it placeholder. Drag every part of the hallway section you just created into the empty game object. After that, you need to duplicate the placeholder game object and drag it to the right so that both hallway sections are side by side. Make sure that both cubes, trigger zone and teleport zone, their axes are facing the same way. This is necessary for the teleportation to work properly. After that, you should rename both the placeholder game object and its duplicate to hallway start section and hallway end section. Now rotate and snap together the hallway end section and the hallway start section to the main hallway ends. After you rename the hallway section, you should rename the cube in the hallway start section to teleport zone and the cube in the hallway end section to trigger zone. Turn off the mesh renderer for the teleport zone and make sure to delete the box collider in the process. Do the same for the trigger zone, but instead of deleting the box collider, keep the box collider and check on the is trigger option. Now press on the Add Components button below and add a new script and call it New Player Teleporter. Open the script you just created. Now that you have your script open, delete the start and update methods. Start by adding a public transform named teleport zone object. This will be used to hold the teleport zone cube we created earlier. Next, we will create a private method named onTriggerEnter. This is a built-in Unity method that can be used to check for objects that have entered its trigger zone. We will be checking for objects that have a player tag. We will add a player controller and give it a player tag later on. Next, we will get the character controller from the player. This temporarily disables the character controller component of the player. Because the character controller can interfere with manual changes to the player's position, it's disabled during teleportation. It's enabled back again after the player has teleported. If you are using a player controller that makes use of a rigid body, you can use this code instead. The next line of code I will type will calculate where the player is relative to the trigger zone. This ensures the player's position is adjusted properly, maintaining their relative position when teleported. For example, if the player is slightly to the left of the zone center, they will still be slightly to the left after teleportation. This line of code will calculate how the player's rotation should change based on the teleport zone's orientation. For example, if the teleport zone is rotated 90 degrees to the right, the player will also turn 90 degrees to the right. The next line of code will move the player to the calculated position at the teleport zone, keeping their relative position intact. This line adjusts the player's orientation to match the teleport zone. Now we will drag our player controller into the scene. I have my own custom player controller, but if you don't have a custom player controller, you could just use a standard free one from the Unity Asset Store. If you want me to make a tutorial about how I made my custom player controller, please let me know in the comments. Make sure your player controller has its tag set to player. Delete the default main camera, otherwise we will have two cameras in one scene. Now I will do some cleanup and create an empty game object named hallway to drag everything into. I will also make an empty game object to drag the main hallway pieces into. I forgot to add the roof when I was building the hallway, so I will do that right now. Make the thickness of the roof whatever you like. I will choose 0.25. The width of the roof should be 3. Finally, before we can test our creation, we must adjust the light to be the same everywhere in the scene. This is a must because the lighting in the hallway start section is different from the lighting in the hallway end section and vice versa. Start by deleting the directional light. Go to the top, click on Window, then on Rendering, and then on Lighting. When you open the lighting settings, go to the Environment tab and change the source from skybox to color. Change the ambient color to a whitish color. Of course, this will not be enough if you are creating a real game. I just use this method to be time efficient. And at last, we can finally test our creation. If you have any questions or feedback, please comment them below. Also consider subscribing. Thank you. See you in the next video.